Unit 10, Day 5. Writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, so hopefully you've already taken the chance to work these problems out. Try them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go straight through these. Okay, so we're going to start in our point slope form. So x1, y1. And so we should have y minus 8 equals negative 1/3 x plus 3 minus a negative 3. And now to get that into slope-intercept form, we distribute. So negative 1/3 times everything in there. So we get negative 1/3 x minus 1. Bring in the y minus 8. Y isn't by itself, so we're going to have to do the opposite. Add 8. And so we should get y equals negative 1/3 x plus 7. And that should be the equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, second one, x1, y1. So we should have y minus 1 equals 2 times x minus 1. 1 and the 1. The slope is right there. Okay, again, we need to distribute. So 2 times everything in here. We get 2x minus 2, y minus 1. Y is not by itself, so we have to add 1 to both sides. Being careful to only do it once on each side. You can combine these two right here, and that becomes a negative 1. So we get 2x minus 1 equals y, because that's a zero pair right there. Now that is in slope-intercept form. Okay, third one of these, x1, y1, should have y minus 2 equals negative 4 times x minus 4. Distributing, I get negative 4 times everything in here, so negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times negative 4, watch our negatives. Get y by itself, watch out for our negatives. It's a plus 16. That's 2. Y is still not by itself, we have to do the opposite, add 2. And so we get a y equals negative 4x plus 18. Now one way you can check this is the slope. Negative 4 up here, negative 4 here, 2, 2, negative 1/3, negative 1/3. The slopes ought to match all those. Okay. Now, numbers 4 and 5, we talked about these yesterday. What's the slope of the line parallel to y equals negative 1/3 x? Okay, so parallel, the way we need to remember that is that that is the same slope. So they're going side by side like that. Okay, so they're going side by side, so they have the same slope. So if it's parallel to this, then that same slope is negative 1/3, because that's the slope of that line. Okay, and so I just want to do this. So if our slope is negative 1/3, our parallel slope and our perpendicular slope. Our parallel slope's the same. Our perpendicular slope would be the opposite reciprocal. It goes from negative to positive. 3 over 1, or 1 over 3 to 3 over 1. And so our perpendicular slope here would be 3. So I'm doing that for the benefit of this next one. The slope of the line perpendicular to y equals negative 7 over 2x minus 5. Okay, so perpendicular means the opposite reciprocal. So it goes from negative to being positive. It's a positive slope. And it goes from 7 over 2 to 2 over 7. So we get m equals 2/7. Okay. Okay, so here are our directions now. Okay, here's where we're going to get into this. This is what we're doing today. Write the equation of the line parallel to the given line through the given point in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So there really turns out to be 3 steps to this. 3 steps. Okay. First step, parallel or perpendicular. Well, these actually say these are all parallel. So the parallel slope, by the way, these two leaning bars, parallel, they look like 2 parallel lines. So the parallel slope is, well, the slope of this line is -1. So the parallel slope is -1. It's the same slope, right? Right. So now we have that along with x1, y1. We can go to point slope. Okay, so there's our step 2. So we're going to have y minus 3 equals -1, x minus 7. And then step 3 is going to actually get the equation. Okay, so we'll distribute these 2 colors out. So we'll distribute -1. And so we get -1x plus 7. And then y is not by itself, so we have to do the opposite and add 3. And so our step 3 is our final answer here. Y equals -1x plus 10. Now, a really good idea that I'm not really going to do a whole lot with these notes, but a really good idea would be to use your calculator, because when you get down to the EOC at the end of the year, you want to be able to check all your answers, right? You want to be able to know when they're right or not. So graph this line on the calculator, graph this line. Okay, if they don't look parallel, then we did something wrong. Okay, but they do have the same slope, so I know that they should be parallel. They just may not go, but make sure it goes. You can make sure it goes through 7, 3. That'll be the good way to check that. Okay, number 7. We need to get y by itself and actually to even figure out the slope. So our step 1 is going to be to find the slope. Okay, starting from square 1. So 2x minus y, we want to get y by itself. You want to see that's a positive 2x there. So we're going to subtract 2x. So we have -y equals -2x. Okay. Well, what number is in front of y? It's really a -1. So we're going to divide by -1. So y equals 2x. So our parallel slope, if the slope on this one is in fact, if the slope here is actually 2, then the parallel slope is also 2. So there's step 1. We get our slope. Step 2, x1, y1, back to point slope. So y minus 4 equals 2 times x minus 3. Okay, we need to distribute. So we get 2x minus 6. Bring down the y minus 4. And 4 to both sides. And so our step 3, our final answer, y equals 2x. Let's see, that's a minus 2. Okay. Just keep these steps in mind, and that will take care of this. So number 8, step 1, find our parallel slope. Okay. Well, this line right here is already in y equals mx plus b, right? So the slope is 1/4. So the parallel slope, remember, parallel, same slope, 1/4. So that part's easy. Part 2, y minus y1, so y minus 7, equals 1/4 times x minus 8. Distribute. So that's 1/4 x minus 2, so y minus 7. To get y by itself, so we add 7 to both sides. So our step 3, y equals 1/4 x plus 5. And again, it'd be a good idea to graph those. In fact, just go ahead and graph those. Obviously, you can't see my graph, but 1/4 x plus 2 tab 1/4 x plus 5. Okay, they're certainly parallel. Maybe you can see that. Okay, they're certainly parallel. And this one ought to go through 8, 7. Well, let me just kind of look at my graph. 8, 2, 3, 4, 8, 7 look like it's kind of in that area. So I could look at the table, I guess, and tell exactly, but I'm pretty sure that one's right. Okay, number 9. Last parallel one we're going to have. Okay, so first step, get our parallel slope. Well, first I've got to figure out the slope for this one. So I want to get y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 6x. All right, so this equation is y equals negative 6x plus 4. So in this case, the slope is negative 6, so my parallel slope is also negative 6. Okay, I need to know that. All right, I'm going to do x1, y1 for my point slope. So y minus 3 equals negative 6 times x plus 2. I'm subtracting a negative there with my point slope, so keep up with the negatives, please. We don't want to have a messy bath of negatives. All right, so let's see. Negative times negative. Distribute that. And so we get negative 6x minus 12. If I'm multiplying that correctly, negative times positive is negative. Y minus 3 is y by itself. Nope, so we have to add 3 to both sides. I'm not going too fast for you guys. 0 pair. And so we get y equals negative 6x minus 9. So there's actually our step 3 and our answer. All right, let's get going. All right, the next 4, we have to change in directions here. Write the equation of the line perpendicular to the given line through the given point in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we still need to find our perpendicular slope. And we need to think a little about that, because perpendicular does not mean the same. Perpendicular means the opposite reciprocal. The opposite reciprocal slope. So if the slope here is 1/2, what's the opposite reciprocal? It goes from positive to negative, so it'll be a negative, and from 1/2 to 2/1. So negative 2/1, or just 2. That's our perpendicular slope. Oh, and I see a shortcut here. I'm not going to take it, but I'll point it out afterwards. Y minus y1, y minus 6 equals m, which is negative 2, using this one over here. Okay. Perpendicular slope is what we're using. That's the whole point of finding it. Times x minus 0. So negative 2 times x, negative 0. Hopefully you can tell that those are 2 different colors. Okay, so negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. And bring down our y minus 6. Y is not yet by itself, so we'll use the opposite and we'll add 6 to both sides. And so we have our third and final step, negative 2x plus 6. Now this one I am certainly going to graph just to make sure. So .b to clear my calculator. We have negative 2x plus 6. Okay, and I'm going to tab 1/2 x plus 4. All right, so if you can see that graph right there, those two look like pretty close to a right angle. Okay, and let's see, now this line needs to go through 0, 6. Well, its y-intercept is 6. In fact, that's the shortcut I noticed before we did that. Okay, if we know the slope already of our line and we know the y-intercept, 0 comma something, that's all we needed. We could have gone straight to this. Hopefully see that. If you don't, I can point that out again in class. Okay. Right? But sometimes you have a shortcut there. But I decided not to take any shortcuts and just to do that whole the long way. Because most of them end up like that, like number 11. So I need to find my perpendicular slope. So again, I'm going to need to find, we have to get y by itself here. So y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 4x. So my slope, just my plain old slope, is -4, it looks like. So my perpendicular slope is going to be the opposite reciprocal. Opposite, okay, so it's going to be positive, given. Now, this is over 1, right? So if I can't flip a 4, but I can take a 4 over 1 and make it a 1 over 4. So a positive 1/4. That's our perpendicular slope. All right, so x1, y1, let's have y minus 5 equals m, which now is 1/4, times x minus 4. So there's my y1, my x1, my slope that we found. Okay, and now to distribute, as we keep doing, make sure you distribute to everything. 1/4 times x doesn't get any more straightforward, just 1/4 x. 1/4 times 4, oh, 1/4, positive 1/4 times a -4. Negative. Actually, 4 goes into both of those, so we just get -1. Now bring down my y minus 5. Okay. As always, my last step is to get that y by itself, so I have to add 5 to both sides and get y equals 1/4 x. The slope is the same as what we started with over there, plus 4. So there we have that one. Okay. Hopefully you're starting to feel like these are the same steps over and over again. Step 1, find your slope, whether it's parallel or perpendicular. Step 2, write it in point slope. Step 3, get it to y equals mx plus b. Okay. mx plus b. I didn't get in the center of the camera. mx plus b. Okay, remember, we gotta remember that slope-intercept form. That's just so important. All right, so perpendicular still. Watch out for these words. Okay, so perpendicular slope. Okay, so what is the slope of this right here? Let's see. Oh, I need this one right here. The slope of this line is 1. So perpendicular, well, that's just 1 over 1, right? So the opposite reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over 1 is just 1 over 1. So 1 over 1, or just 1. And the opposite, from positive 1 to negative 1. Here's the slope. Now, at this point, forget about that line totally. Forget about this line right here. Okay, focus on the point, because we don't actually need anything else from that. We have the slope. That's all we need from that. Okay, so if I write my in point slope, so y plus 1 equals -1 times x plus 1. Okay, now hopefully that's really obvious right here, right? Because we had minus a -1, minus a -1. Pardon me. I'm still getting over being sick. So minus a -1, minus a -1. There we have it. So distribute. Here. -1 times lots of things. Negative changes all the signs. So negative times positive is negative, so -1x. Negative times positive is -1x, or -1 right there. And y plus 1. Okay, so now I need to get y by itself. So I subtract 1 from both sides. Now be really careful right here with the negatives, because the signs will throw you off. Our step 3 is y equals -1x, because that's the slope we had here. -1 minus 1. It's like you owe somebody $1, now you owe them $1 more. You owe them 2, so it's a -2 is actually what that is. And just like I said before, you might want to graph these two and just make sure that this line goes through -1, -1, and that it is perpendicular because they ought to be pretty close. Okay, one more like this. Okay, write an equation of the line that passes, oh, I skipped that one, 13, haha, just kidding. Step 1, I want to find the perpendicular slope. Okay, so if I find the slope of this line right here, I need to subtract 3x. So my equation of that line is y equals -3x plus 1. So that slope is -3. I'm going to write that as a fraction real quick. -3 over 1. Okay, so let me just bring that over here. -3 over 1. That's the slope. So the opposite reciprocal, opposite goes from negative to positive. So negative, negative to positive. The positive slope over here from 3 over 1 to 1 over 3. So positive 1/3. There's our slope. So x1, y1, y minus 4 equals 1/3 times x minus 2. And let's see, if I distribute that, I get 1/3 x minus 2/3. And that doesn't reduce any. And I've got y minus 4. Now for my third step, my final trick, I want to get y by itself. Well, just like we've had on every one of these, we need to add 4. So y equals 1/3 x negative 2/3 plus 4. Now, if you're well versed in your fractions at all, that is 12/3. This should be 9/3 or 3. Oh, sorry. Times 3. 12/3. What am I doing wrong? Times 3. 12. Oh, 12/3. 12/3. Not. Okay, not 12/4. So minus 2, so we get 10/3. So plus 10/3. Okay. Last two. Write an equation of the line that passes through the point -2, 6 and is parallel to the given line. Then graph it on the grid below. All right, so we'll be able to see really clearly if we did our work right this time. Okay, so it goes through this point, and it's parallel to this. Okay, so, oh, you know what? I'm going to cut ahead of myself just a little bit, okay? So it's parallel to this. So what's the slope of this line? Well, let's see. It goes up 1. So if I pick 2 good points, it goes up 1 and over 1. So that slope is 1 over 1. So my parallel slope is going to be 1. So it's going to have a slope of 1. So I'm just going to graph it right there. And I am taking very good care to go through each one of those grid points. Okay, so now that I've done that, what is the equation of that line I just drew? So I just made it where it would stand out. What is the equation of that? Well, what's the slope of that line? And what's the y-intercept? Well, the slope of it, we just said is 1, right? That right there. The y-intercept is that point right there. It's 0, 8. So 8. So our equation then, if our slope is 1, our y-intercept is 8, then our slope of our parallel line is y equals 1x plus 8. Now, if you want to make sure you know this really well, do this the other way. Do this with the point slope. I guarantee you'll come up with the same answer. But that's a good way to know that you've got your skills down. Okay, on to go to 15. Write an equation of the line that passes through the point -2, 6, and is perpendicular to the given line. I don't know if you noticed, but these are the same graph, so that's actually the same. So the slope of this is 1 over 1, or just 1. So the perpendicular slope, so we already have it written as 1 over 1. So the opposite reciprocal, So we take 1 over 1, we flip it, we get 1 over 1. So it's a negative 1 over 1. Okay, so if I start at that point, if I have a negative slope, that's down 1 over 1. Right? Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. And I get all these points right here. Okay, which those two will be perpendicular. Right, now to just find out the equation of this line that I just drew, I need two things. The slope and the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is actually right there, 4. The slope we just said was negative 1. So the perpendicular line here is y equals negative 1x plus 4. And again, if you want to know that your skills are sharp, go do that doing the way that we did all the rest of these. You will come out with the same answer. All right, let's get this done. On to our assignment.